Hi, I'm Farley, and my sister didn't just find out I had 18 million, she told everyone I stole it. At dinner, in front of my whole family. But the truth is, that night didn't break me. It confirmed something I had felt my whole life, that they were never really with me, just around me, watching, waiting. They called me selfish, cold, greedy after years of me paying their bills, covering their secrets. And when I finally spoke up, they said I ruined the family. But what kind of family do you ruin by simply telling the truth? The house smelled like rosemary and roast chicken, just like it had every December since I could remember. Veramy mother still insisted on hosting an early family dinner ahead of the holidays, even though the family part of it felt thinner each year. I had pulled into her driveway just after 5 p.m. The porch lights were already glowing against the Oregon dusk, and snow flirted with the edges of the gutters, but never really stuck. Callista greeted me at the door with a smile that felt like it was pressed on with glue. "You're early," she said, stepping aside but not moving far enough for comfort. "Traffic was kind," I murmured. I walked in, slipping off my coat like muscle memory. The living room was full uncles, cousins, their kids running around like it wasn't freezing outside. Everything was warm, except the people. I noticed right away. The seating Chartleway's unofficial was clearly engineered. Callista's place was next to Vera at the head of the table, while mine sat exiled near the far end, close to the kitchen entrance where the cold air crept in every time the door swung. It wasn't the seat that stung. It was the intention. Dinner started quietly, just small talk and obligatory smiles. I pushed my green beans around my plate, nodding when someone asked about work, but offering nothing. I'd learned the hard way nothing I shared here stayed here. Everything was filtered through comparison, judgment, or worse, dismissal. Midway through the meal, Callista cleared her throat and stood. She held a stack of printed papers in her hand, her manicured fingers gripping them like a winning hand in poker. Everyone turned to her, forkfuls paused midair. "I wasn't going to bring this up," she began, an obvious lie. "But I think it's time we had some transparency in this family." My stomach dropped. Callista turned toward Vera. "Mom, I came across something concerning, and I think the rest of the family deserves to know." She held up the papers. "Farley, or dear Farley, has been hiding something. She's sitting on $18 million. And based on these financial summaries, it looks like she siphoned that money from the family trust." A wave of sound rushed through the room, gasps, whispers, a dropped fork. I didn't move. I didn't blink. "That's ridiculous," I finally said, my voice flat. Callista handed the pages to our Uncle Charles, who adjusted his glasses and started reading like he was back in a courtroom. "Is this true, Farley?" he asked, eyes narrowed. Not once did anyone ask how Callista got access to my financial information. Vera didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the salt shaker, then took a long sip of her wine. "I don't even have access to that trust," I said quietly. "That's not what this says," Callista shot back. Then, as if she had been waiting for the dramatic cue, she pulled a USB stick from her pocket. "Actually, I brought proof." She walked over to the TV in the living room, plugged it in, and opened a document. A financial transfer agreement appeared on screen, full of dense legalese and my name stamped across the top. It looked official-timed, signed, even sealed. It was also completely fake. I knew it the second I saw the signature. It wasn't mine. It was close, but not close enough. And the logo in the footer was outdated, a bank that had rebranded 2 years ago. A detail only someone who lived in paperwork would notice. No one noticed. They stared at the screen, quiet as the snow now falling outside. My heart thudded once, hard, then steadied. I scanned the faces around me, blank, confused, some looking away entirely. I turned to Vera. "Mom?" My voice was smaller than it meant it to be. She blinked slowly, still not looking at me. "If it's true, maybe it's time to share, Farley." That was it. No defense. No question. I felt my body go cold, not from the draft, but from realization. They'd already made their choice. The truth wasn't relevant if it wasn't convenient. I placed my napkin on the table, neatly, like I wasn't unraveling inside. "You've all decided who I am," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Don't be surprised when I decide who I want to be next." I didn't leave right away, but I wish I had. I stepped outside just far enough to feel the bite of the night air. My boots sank slightly into the wet grass, and the porch light flickered as if unsure whether to keep pretending it still worked. I stood there in the cold, arms wrapped tight across my chest, waiting for someone, anyone, to follow me out. No one did. Not my mother. Not Callista. I listened for the sound of the door creaking open behind me. Nothing. Not even a draft of heat from inside. That silence? It wasn't hesitation. It was a choice. You don't walk away from a table like that without hoping someone runs after you. And when they don't, it hits different. It's not just rejection, it's confirmation. That's when I realized silence isn't neutral. It's a verdict. I didn't get in my car. Not yet. Instead, I walked around to the side of the house where the old swing still hung from the oak tree Dad used to trim every spring. I sat down, my legs too long for the seat now, and rocked back and forth until the creaking rope matched my heartbeat. No tears. Not this time. Eventually, I went back and not through the front, but the side entrance. No one noticed, or pretended not to. Upstairs, the guest room still had the same layout from when I was a teenager, but the warmth was gone. A room can remember who mattered. This one didn't remember me. The next morning, I found Vera in the kitchen making instant coffee, like she always did when she didn't want to talk long. I poured my own and sat across from her. We didn't look at each other for a full minute. "You knew it wasn't true," I finally said. "And you still said what you said." She stirred her cup with a spoon that clinked too loudly against the ceramic. "You've always been independent, Farley. You don't need defending." That was her answer. That was all I was going to get. So being quiet while they throw me under the bus, that's what independence means now? Vera folded the newspaper and pushed it aside. "I'm too old for this type of drama over money. It always comes back to money." "It wasn't about money until Callista made it about money," I said. "And now I'm the villain in a story I didn't write." She didn't flinch, just stood up and carried her cup to the sink, rinsing it as if it had betrayed her too. After that, she started talking about which neighbor sold their house and how expensive Christmas lights were this year, like nothing had happened. I drove back to Portland before noon, the radio off the whole way. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat with messages I ignored until one made me stop breathing for half a second. A tag. A link. Callista's profile. She had posted a video taken at the dinner, without my knowledge. The caption read, "Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, but family deserves honesty. Transparency matters." In the clip, she stood holding the printouts and recited the same lines she'd said to my face. But on camera, she looked composed. Concerned even, like this wasn't a takedown, but a cry for family unity. Comments poured in. "She looks hurt." Poor Callista. I knew that Farley girl was shady. Rich people always hide something. Props for speaking up. Most people stay silent. I stared at the screen until the light blurred. I didn't feel rage, not yet. I felt something deeper. Contamination. It wasn't just my name she dragged. It was my integrity. I called her. She picked up on the third ring. "Well," she said with a little breathy laugh, "that didn't take long. You posted a video without my consent." "It was in a public space," she replied. "Besides, truth always rises, doesn't it? You edited it." "I highlighted what mattered," she said. "You could have spoken up. You didn't." I hung up before my hands started shaking. At work the next day, I noticed the difference before I even stepped off the elevator. Fewer smiles. A good morning that came a beat too late. I opened my inbox and saw 3 messages flagged as urgent. 2 were from clients asking to revisit our terms. The third was from an investor who wanted to pause our quarterly agreement pending clarity. My assistant, Brianna, approached with hesitation written all over her face. "Hey, she said. I don't mean to pry, but the video it's kind of everywhere. Is it true? I looked at her. The same girl who once cried in my office after a breakup and ate chocolate off my desk for an hour. She couldn't meet my eyes. Instead of answering, I said, "Just forward me today's schedule." She nodded and walked away. I buried myself in spreadsheets and contracts, trying to pretend that focus could fix everything. But my mind kept circling back to moments I hadn't let myself replay in years. Photos with only Callista in the frame. Christmas mornings where her gifts were wrapped in ribbons, mine in recycled paper bags. The time she accidentally booked over my college tour to take a spontaneous weekend trip to LA. People say words cut, but sometimes silence does worse. Silence erases. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a pen in hand, not because I needed to write, but because my thoughts needed somewhere to land that wasn't inside me. I opened my journal and wrote one line. If they want war, they'll get it. But I'll fight in my way. That morning, I woke early, long before the city began to stir. The air inside my apartment felt weighted, like it too had witnessed what I'd been through and didn't know how to comfort me. Outside, downtown Portland was wrapped in a gray stillness. The fog hugged the buildings like secrets clinging to cold walls. I made coffee, more out of ritual than need, and sat at the table where unopened mail had been stacking up since before Thanksgiving. Junk offers, nonprofit newsletters, old receipts. I was halfway through the pile when I found ETA, worn, yellowed envelope with my own handwriting on the back. No return address, just a smudged stamp and a postmark from 3 years ago. I opened it, slowly, unsure why my chest tightened as I did. Inside was a receipt. A mortgage payment, the mortgage payment for Vera's house. The final one. Paid in full. My signature sat quietly at the bottom, dated and clean. It all came rushing back. Callista had called me in tears back then, saying Vera was behind on payments, embarrassed to tell anyone. I offered to help. She insisted that if I sent the money, it had to come under her name. "Mom doesn't need to know," she said. "She'd just feel ashamed." And I agreed. I mailed the payment myself. I even wrapped the stub in a napkin like it was a confession too delicate for paper alone. I'd forgotten. Not because it wasn't important, but because I never thought I'd need proof. I called Dorian. He answered on the third ring, voice low. "Hey, everything okay? I need you to look in the kitchen drawer, the one near the sink at Vera's," I said. "There's a stack of old paperwork. A red folder, I think." There was a pause. Then he said, "Give me 5. 10 minutes later, he texted a photo of the original stub. The envelope was still there too, folded but untouched. They didn't lose it. They ignored it. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, creating a new folder on my desktop. The ledger. Inside it, I dragged the receipt image, then opened my email history. Years of messages. Subject lines like, "Can you help cover this?" "Emergency expense, just until next month." All signed by Vera. Some from Callista. None of them had thank you notes. Not even a got it. I pulled them all in, screenshot by screenshot. The digital archive grew. Bank transfers, forwarded bills, loan payoff confirmations. I hadn't realized how much of their survival had my fingerprints on it. And yet I'd become the villain. The thief. The liar. Later that afternoon, I scrolled through an old family group chat we barely used. Mostly Callista's announcements and Vera's birthday reminders. But then I found it. A message from Vera, dated 2 years ago. "We're all so lucky to have Callista's support. She's done more for this family than anyone, including helping with Farley's college expenses." I blinked. That was false. My entire tuition had been covered by merit scholarships and part-time jobs I held during school. Callista had nothing to do with it. My hands trembled, not with anger, but clarity. They didn't just forget. They rewrote history, and I had let them. Because I kept quiet. Because I didn't correct them. Because I thought it wasn't worth the conflict. But now it was different. Now the silence served them, and it destroyed me. I clicked open a voice memo on my phone and recorded one sentence. They made a story, and I stopped showing up in it. That night, I returned to the envelope. I opened a document file and titled it, The Ledger of Truth. Then I wrote a summary of each incident amount, date, purpose, recipient. I included screenshots, scanned receipts, timestamps, even metadata from original files. I wasn't going to publish it, not yet, but I needed to remember, and more importantly, I needed them to. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, about never again letting someone else narrate my intentions, my sacrifices, my place. I wasn't going to beg for memory. I was going to make them remember. The night after I finished compiling the ledger, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Callista's voice from that video measured, composed, so damn believable. By morning, I had made a decision. I didn't call ahead. I just drove to Beaverton. It was just past 10 when I pulled into the driveway. The wreath was already on the front door, and Vera's car was parked neatly to the side. She opened the door like she expected me. Maybe she did. I need the tax documents from 18, I said, brushing past her before she could protest. She let me in, wordless. The living room hadn't changed. That familiar scent of old lemon polish, the same beige rug, the same family portraits. I stood in front of them while Vera rustled papers in the next room. On the wall, there were 10 photos in gold-trimmed frames. Callista, as a toddler on Vera's lap. Callista at her high school graduation. Callista holding Dorian in the hospital room. Not one image of me. Not even the fake smiles from holidays past. I didn't need to ask. The wall answered for her. While I waited, Dorian stepped into the hallway. He didn't say anything at first. Just glanced toward the kitchen, then back at me. Then he handed me a small leather notebook. I found this in Mom's drawer, he whispered. I think you should read it. I opened it slowly. It smelled like dust and dried ink. On the third page, in a loopy teenage script, were the words, I hate that she's always ahead. If I don't act soon, I'll be the backup daughter forever. My fingers tightened around the binding. It wasn't just envy. It was intent. Page after page, Callista had mapped her resentment like a campaign strategy. Every compliment I ever received was an insult to her existence. Every achievement of mine felt like a theft of her spotlight. None of this was recent. I sat down on the arm of the couch, journal in hand, and let the memories pour back in with a different hue. Callista had offered to mail my scholarship form senior year, said she was going downtown anyway. Weeks later, I learned it arrived too late. I lost that grant. She once peeked at a pitch I was drafting for a business incubator contest. Weeks later, her grad school submission had the same framing, the same title. She said it was coincidence. I believed her. I shouldn't have. This wasn't bad luck. These were moves. I found her alone on the patio after lunch, her phone in one hand, texting with nails that never chipped. I didn't raise my voice. I just asked, did you mean what you wrote? About needing to beat me? About being the backup daughter? She looked up slowly. Didn't flinch. Didn't deny it. Her voice was soft. You were never really one of us, Farley. You were the afterthought. That sentence didn't land like a slap. It landed like a diagnosis. I turned to Vera, who had stepped out behind me. She didn't gasp. She didn't defend. She looked down and adjusted the sleeves of her sweater, like she hadn't heard a thing. That was the last straw. I walked out without another word. The door slammed behind me harder than I expected, and I didn't look back to see if either of them had followed. They wouldn't have. The drive back to Portland blurred through a tunnel of trees and radio static. No music could match the noise inside me anyway. I wasn't angry the way I'd been before. I wasn't shocked. What I felt now was something else, like someone had finally handed me a map to a maze I'd been wandering for years. No more ambiguity. No more second-guessing. No more waiting for someone to say, we were wrong. That evening, I pulled out a new journal. Not the one for facts, the one I kept for clarity. I turned to a fresh page and wrote at the top in capital letters, definitions. Underneath, I made two columns. One read, "Who they say I am." The other, "Who I actually am." The first column stayed empty. I didn't care about their definitions anymore. The second started with, "The woman they tried to erase but didn't." That night, I wrote a new version of the Story Me version. One they couldn't edit. By the time the sun rose, I already knew what I had to do. I brewed coffee stronger than usual and opened my laptop like I was clocking in. But this wasn't work, it was clarity disguised as admin. No more playing the quiet one. No more swallowing what they dished out. I started drafting a letter cold, factual, unmistakable. To Vera and Callista, it began. This is formal notification that I am documenting your actions over the past month and prior years for legal and personal clarity. I didn't call them mom or sis. They'd forfeited those titles when they used my silence as a stage to rewrite who I was. The letter laid everything out in plain, unemotional languages: slander, financial distortion, willful manipulation of family dynamics for personal gain. I didn't threaten. I didn't plead. I just stated, with full legal backup, that I was keeping records and expected all communication going forward to be in writing. No heat, just precision. Mid-morning, I pulled out the old storage bin from my hallway closet, the one that smelled like mildew and forgotten years. It held photos, old report cards, and file folders labeled in my handwriting. One manila folder was thicker than the rest. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges, folded 3 times. I recognized it instantly. The fake waiver Callista and Vera had asked me to sign when I was barely out of college. Just a formality, Vera had said. You're not the type to worry about inheritance anyway. I hadn't read it then. I trusted them. Now I read every line. It was typed like a legal form, but missing key elements. No witness signatures, no notary seal, and a date that didn't even match the day I'd supposedly signed. It had been pushed in front of me after brunch one Saturday while Vera cleared dishes and Callista checked her phone. I scanned it into my laptop and sent it to Jude. 10 minutes later, he called. It's invalid, he said. Not even close to enforceable. You were emotionally coerced, and legally, it wouldn't stand up in traffic court. I should have felt angry. Instead, I felt a slow relief, like a splinter finally worked its way out after years under the skin. Start compiling everything, Jude said next. The live stream, the dinner confrontation, the forged documents, all of it. Already on it, I replied. We shared a quiet pause before he added, You still want to offer them a way out before this escalates? Yes, I said. But just once. That afternoon, I sat at the small conference table in his office while we outlined the key points. Jude clicked through my screenshots and digital archive like a surgeon examining an X-ray. Neither of us smiled. This wasn't about winning. It was about stopping the hemorrhage. He said something that stuck. People like your sister think they're invincible until you show them paperwork. I called Vera later that evening. I didn't script it. I just let the line ring and prepared for whatever came. She answered. Farley? This isn't a check-in, I said calmly. I am calling to let you know I'm formalizing everything. The money, the public slander, the document Callista showed at dinner, it's all being reviewed by counsel. A pause. Then, you're turning your back on blood? No, I said. I'm just refusing to be bled dry anymore. She didn't say goodbye. Neither did I. I closed the call and sat quietly for a while, staring at the wall in front of me. On it was a framed photo of me alone, taken after the first big award my company won. No one else had attended that ceremony. I hadn't invited them. I'd been preparing for this break for longer than I knew. I opened the ledger on my desktop and added 2 new file scans of the invalid waiver and an audio note summarizing my phone call with Vera. I archived every voicemail from Callista and Vera under a folder named Past. I didn't delete them. I wasn't erasing history. I was just drawing a line between what came before and what would never happen again. Before heading to bed, I printed 2 copies of the letterone for Vera, one for Callista's hand, walked them down to the mailbox. Each envelope was certified, tracking included. The air was crisp, sharper than usual. I stood there for a second, hand on the cold metal of the box, then dropped them in. I didn't expect a reply, and I certainly didn't expect remorse. But I gave them one last out, and I knew they wouldn't take it. 2 weeks. That was how long I waited. Long enough for the certified letters to be signed for by Callista's assistant and Vera's neighbor, no less. But not a single word came back. No call, no message. Not even one of Callista's phony, heartfelt social posts tagging me in a half-baked apology. Instead, I watched from a distance as Callista continued painting herself the victim on social media. Captions like "family wounds cut deepest, but truth protects us." She was consistent, I'll give her that. Consistently performative. The silence was my answer, and I knew exactly what it meant. Tuesday morning, I walked into Jude's office downtown, calm and composed, carrying a slim manila envelope. He took one look at me and closed the blinds before I even sat down. "You're sure?" he asked. I nodded. Time to stop giving them chances they won't take. He slid the folder open and pulled out the final piece. The original contract. Not a photocopy, not a scantha document. Stamped, notarized, dated. A trust agreement drawn up years ago that clearly stated I had never been named as a beneficiary. Jude studied it one last time, even though we both knew it was ironclad. If we go public with this, Farley, they'll collapse before they blink. I took a long breath in. Then it's time. By Thursday, I had booked a private session at a media recording suite downtown. The room was neutral gray walls, soft lighting, a single camera set up with just enough distance to keep it from feeling like an interrogation. My friend Angela, a former publicist, sat with me through the prep. She didn't push, didn't coach. She just said, "Talk like you're talking to yourself." I did. I told the truth. From my first job scrubbing floors in a hotel lobby at 16, to the night I pulled my mother out of foreclosure while Callista was in Cabo. I included timelines, financial records, screenshots of transfer confirmations, every number checked, every detail verified. But I didn't name-call. I didn't point fingers. I didn't need to. My voice carried the weight of someone who had been silent too long. Angela uploaded the video to a controlled press account. She said it wouldn't take off right away. But within 48 hours, it did. It didn't go viral the way gossip does, but it didn't need to. Clients started sending messages of support. One investor, who'd been quiet for a week, sent a single-line email. "Glad you spoke." In the family group chat, which had gone dead since Thanksgiving, someone quietly left the conversation. Then another. "I didn't check who. I didn't care." That weekend, Vera called. I let it ring, twice. Then I blocked the number. There was nothing left to clarify. Not anymore. On Monday, I saw Callista's latest post. White background, black serif font. Sometimes the people who cry victim the loudest are the ones who wounded you first. I didn't comment. I didn't share. But someone else did. Beneath the post, buried among likes and supportive emojis, was a single comment from a verified account. "Didn't your sister just drop court-certified proof? Might want to sit this one out." For the first time in months, I smiled. Not because I wanted revenge, not even because I felt vindicated. I smiled because I had done something my family never expected had spoken up, and I hadn't crumbled. I hadn't said much, but apparently I'd said enough. The echo of the last message hung in my head for days. I hadn't replied to Vera's call. I didn't respond to the post Callista made. But people did. People I didn't expect. And that changed everything. It was a little after 8 p.m. when I was still at the office, going over a stack of contracts with Jude. The city outside had already folded into darkness. We were halfway through finalizing our press follow-up when the intercom buzzed. "There's someone here to see you," my receptionist said. "He says it's personal." Jude raised a brow at me. I nodded. "Let him up." When the door opened, I nearly dropped the pen in my hand. "Nathan?" I said, the name falling out of me before I could shape it into a question. Nathan Ellis. Callista's ex from 6 years ago. He looked different now, cleaner, sharper. His gray suit hugged his frame like he belonged in it. But there was something in his eyes. Not rage. Calculation. Jude stood. Nathan reached out to me privately last night. He has something to show you. And he wants it public. Nathan stepped forward and placed a folder on the table. I figured if anyone would understand, it'd be you. Inside the folder were emails, dozens of them, between him and Callista. Some from when they were together, others just months after they broke up. Password reset confirmations, transfers between accounts, documents signed under emotional pressure. She convinced me to let her move money into my accounts. Said she was protecting assets from predatory family members. Said you were unstable and might try to drain the trust. I swallowed hard. There's more, he added. She used my credentials to open 2 separate lines of credit. One's still active. I only found out because a client flagged it during a background check. Jude leaned in. This could end her credibility overnight. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. My body had already gone cold from the confirmation. Same pattern, same manipulation. Just a different victim with a longer fuse. I used to think she was just dramatic, Nathan said. Now I think she's dangerous. I thanked him quietly and promised we'd be in touch. After he left, I walked to the window, looking out over the lights of downtown. How many people believed her because she looked polished? I said aloud. Jude answered from behind me. Most people trust a clean shirt before they trust a quiet room. I pulled up my own files again, my version of the truth. Every line in that ledger had weight. But now, I had something she couldn't spine another voice. One that used to be on her side. Later that night, at home, I couldn't sleep. I found myself scrolling through old emails again. And that's when I found it. A message buried deep in a forgotten thread between Vera and a former family attorney. The subject line, transfer suggestion Callista to manage estate. I opened it. Vera had written, Farley has never asked for anything. She doesn't need to be involved. Callista is better suited for long-term responsibility. Let's make this easy. There it was. Not just a passive betrayal, not a misunderstanding, a strategic exclusion. Vera hadn't just watched this unfold. She had carved the path. I stared at the screen, letting the sentence settle like ash. How many moments had I explained away? How many times had I told myself, they just didn't think it through, when in reality, it was by design? I picked up the phone and called Dorian. He answered immediately. You told me once you wanted the truth, I said. Are you still willing to help me prove it? He didn't hesitate. Whatever you need. I exhaled. The kind of breath you don't notice you've been holding until it leaves you. Back at the office the next day, I turned on the recording light in my private studio. I adjusted the mic, stared straight into the lens, and said, not for YouTube, not for the internet, but to myself, plainly. No more guessing. No more waiting for them to fix it. I'll finish this. The city hadn't changed overnight, but I had. The morning after Nathan's visit and the message from Dorian, I walked into Jude's office with a flash drive in my pocket and a purpose behind every step. He and Angela, my friend and former publicist, were already waiting. Angela looked at me with that quiet nod she always gave before something big. Jude pushed a single sheet of paper toward me. Everything's reviewed, every document, date, name, and the audio. You sure you want to use it? I slid the flash drive across the table. It's time. We booked the recording session for noon. It wasn't dramatic. No makeup artist, no spotlight. Just a camera, a mic, and truth delivered plainly. This isn't about humiliating them, I said quietly as we prepped. It's about ending the performance, letting the facts speak, finally. Angela pressed record. I started from the beginning, my beginnings, working 2 part-time jobs through college, paying off a mortgage that wasn't mine. The years I showed up, gave, covered, and kept silent. My voice didn't crack. I didn't dramatize. I walked through the timeline of events like I would any board meeting, calm, factual, undeniable. When I reached the part about the dinner, I paused. This is what people need to understand, I said. When someone's quiet for years, it doesn't mean they're weak. It means they've been collecting every detail you hoped they'd forget. Then I played the clip. Dorian had sent it the night before, shaking hands and all. A voice recording, low and slightly muffled, but crystal clear in its impact. Callista's voice. I had to get ahead of her before she made us irrelevant. Then Vera, in the background, responding, Farley won't speak up. She never does. That moment stayed in the room longer than anything had said. Angela stopped the recording. Jude reviewed it all once more. You don't owe them another breath, he said. I nodded. But they'll hear this one. We scheduled the segment to drop across my business site, Angela's media channel, and a private link to clients and partners. It went live the next morning. By lunch, my inbox had tripled. But not in the way it used to, not the freezing, doubting silence. Now it buzzed. From clients, we stand with you. From investors, let us know how we can support. Even from past contacts I hadn't spoken to in years, took guts. Glad you finally said something. By 5 p.m., a local business outlet picked up the story. The headline read, CEO's calm disclosure dismantles family accusation. That night, Vera emailed me. Just one sentence, you ruined your sister. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have words, but because she wasn't owed any more explanations. I wasn't the one who'd ruined Callista. That was the consequence of her own script, finally exposed in daylight. Callista's Instagram went private. Her LinkedIn bio changed from community advocate to consultant. Dorian texted me later. They're furious, but they're quiet now. I replied, let them be. The following morning, I went to my favorite caf, the one I'd avoided for weeks. Not because it was unsafe, but because I hated the way people had looked at me piety, gossip, confusion. This time, when I walked in, a woman at the next table gave me a smile that wasn't fake. It wasn't awkward either. It said, we see you now. I didn't look away. For once, I didn't feel like I had to. The storm had passed, but what lingered was quieter and more personal. Spring had crept into Portland without asking. One morning, I woke up and the rain had softened. The sky stayed pale instead of bruised, and cherry blossoms hung from the trees like they had every year, whether I noticed them or not. I walked more now. Not because I needed exercise, but because I needed space. Quiet had returned to my life, but this time, it didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like a choice. No missed calls, no unread messages, no passive-aggressive texts about family or forgiveness. At the caf on 21st, people nodded to me differently, not because they wanted gossip, but because they had heard the truth. And when I nodded back, I didn't feel small. I felt real. One afternoon, as I was finishing my latte and folding up my laptop, Jude arrived with a sealed envelope. His expression was unreadable, but kind. From your father, he said. He asked me to hold it. Said to only give it to you if your name was ever questioned. I took it slowly, the weight of paper somehow heavier than it should have been. At home, I sat on the floor with my back to the couch and opened it. Farley, I saw you even when others didn't. I saw how you built everything without noise. You didn't need a spotlight to shine. I know you'd never steal. You built something they'll never understand because you did it alone. And I'm proud of you. Even if I didn't always say it right. The tears came then, but not with the sting it'd known. These weren't about grief or rage. They were warm, cleansing, grief with gratitude stitched in. That week, I made a quiet decision. Vexley & Co. became official. I signed the paperwork, moved my brand under the new name, and filed Vera as estranged on the legal forms. It wasn't meant to punish, it was simply accurate. I also created the Franklin Vexley Foundation, a small scholarship program for young women, overlooked by the systems around them. Girls who were told they were too independent to need help. Girls like me. The first donation came from a woman in Idaho I'd never met, with a note that read, I saw your story. I have a daughter who reminds me of you. Late one night, as the city dimmed down into warm-lit windows and quiet sidewalks, Dorian messaged me. They're still pretending nothing happened. But I saw everything, and I'm proud of you. I didn't respond immediately. I sat with it. Then typed, that means more than you know. Sometimes the conversations you wish you had never happen. There was no apology from Vera, no teary voicemail from Callista, no big family reconciliation at a kitchen table. And that was okay. I imagined what Vera would have said if she had called. Maybe. We only wanted the best for you. We thought you were strong enough to take the hits. And maybe I would have answered, strength doesn't mean silence. It means surviving what should have broken you. A therapist once told me that some forgiveness is lived, not spoken. I used to think that meant letting people back in. Now I know it just means letting them go without dragging their weight behind you. So, I did. And in the space they left, I made room for other things. I hosted dinner one Saturday night, not a big gathering, just the people who stayed. Friends who didn't flinch when it got messy. Colleagues who believed the truth before I had to prove it. We talked about business, books, ridiculous things we'd seen on the news. There was laughter, not forced, not polite. Real. Like I hadn't heard in a long time. After everyone left, I cleaned up slowly, humming under my breath. I lit a candle, made tea, and sat by the window. Then I opened a new notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "They don't get to write me out anymore." I smiled, closed the book, and looked out at the night. Finally, it was quiet, and I was free.